A yellow envelope and a small key changed my fate. Uncle Ernesto's will came like a storm on a clear day, unexpected, sudden, and in a way, reassuring. "Mr. Lucas, congratulations on the inheritance," said the lawyer as he handed me the documents. "The small storage unit on Jasmine Street is now yours." When I got home, I showed everything to Teresa. She always had a gift for seeing beyond the obvious. "You could sell it," she commented while checking out the photos of the place. "Or maybe keep it. That neighborhood is growing, you know? That area has potential." Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to access more stories like this. The next day, we went to check out the storage unit. It was a simple building with 20 storage units, all empty. The building needed some maintenance but was in decent shape. "By selling it now, we might cover part of the mortgage," I said out loud. Teresa touched my arm. "Think carefully before you decide. Your uncle chose you for a reason." I spent the following week cleaning the place, fixing the wiring, and painting the front. Every brushstroke made me feel more attached to the place. I started thinking of the possibilities. "I think I'm going to keep the storage unit," I told Teresa during dinner. "I can manage it on the weekends. It'll be an interesting extra source of income." 3 weeks after taking over the storage unit, a woman knocked on my door. Her hair was immaculate, she wore a grey blazer, and her smile never quite reached her eyes. "I'm Regina Oliveira, president of the Bella Vista Homeowners Association," she introduced herself formally. "I heard you inherited Mr. Ernesto's storage unit." I nodded, feeling an inexplicable tension. "We have a problem with community equipment. Lawn mowers, gardening tools, seasonal decorations. We need space to store all this. Would you be willing to give one of the units to the community? It would be a very much appreciated gesture." The request seemed reasonable. After all, I had only recently moved into the condominium and wanted to fit in. "Sure, we can arrange one unit for community use." Regina smiled. "Wonderful. Please sign here." "It is just a formality." I signed quickly, without reading the details. A mistake that would later cost me dearly. 2 days later, I found trucks unloading equipment in several units of my storage facility. "Wait, the agreement was for only one unit," I protested to the supervisor. "I have orders from Mrs. Oliveira to use all available units," he replied, showing me a copy of the document I had signed. When I tried to enter the storage unit the following morning, I discovered that the locks had been changed. A notice posted at the entrance read, "Community property of Bella Vista Condominium. Access restricted to the administration." I immediately called Regina. "There must be a misunderstanding," I explained. "The agreement was for a single unit, not the entire storage facility." "The document you signed says otherwise, Mr. Lucas," she replied coldly. "And now that the space is being used for community purposes, we have to follow security protocols." That afternoon, I received a group email addressed to all residents. "We appreciate Mr. Lucas's generous donation, lending the storage unit for community use and demonstrating true cooperation spirit." Neighbors began stopping me on the street to thank me. Some sent gift baskets and cards. I was stunned. "We need a lawyer," Teresa said, worried. "They are twisting everything." When I tried to check the original document I had signed, Regina claimed it was being processed at the association's office. "Your storage unit isn't even under the HOA's jurisdiction," explained Gabriel, a neighbor who worked as a real estate agent. "We were having coffee on his balcony while he studied the property maps. Look, the boundary line ends right before your lot." With that information in hand, I visited the city planning department. After hours of research, I discovered something even more intriguing. "Bella Vista Condominium has received 3 warnings in the last few months," said a friendly staff member. "They are storing equipment in unauthorized areas, creating fire hazards." Suddenly, it all made sense. Regina needed a place to store the equipment before the next inspection. My storage unit fit perfectly. Later, I ran into Camila Ferreira, the association's secretary, at the local supermarket. Regina and Eduardo are desperate, she confided, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. The fines add up to almost $15,000. Eduardo works in the planning department and has managed to delay the inspections, but not for long. The day after I contacted the city legal department, I received 3 violation notices for the condominium's conduct code, fence of irregular height, house color outside of the approved standard, and unmaintained vegetation. Each notice came with a fine of $500. Ironically, my house had been approved by the association just 3 months earlier. Teresa was furious. This is pure retaliation. The worst was yet to come. On Thursday, coming home from work, I found a crew cutting down the giant oak in our backyard, a century-old tree that had provided shade and beauty to our home. "What are you doing?" I shouted, running toward the workers. "Direct order from the administration," one of them answered while handing me a paper. "The tree has been declared a danger to the condominium structure." I stood frozen, watching the branches fall. That tree had been one of the reasons we chose this house. Teresa used to read underneath its shade on weekends. The neighborhood children loved playing around it. That night, sitting in the devastated yard, I swore I would find a way to expose Regina and her corrupt scheme, no matter what it took. The cutting of my tree became a turning point. As I looked at the empty space where the majestic oak once stood, I realized I could not face Regina alone. The next day, a knock at the door surprised me. It was Mr. Antonio Martins, an elderly man with grey hair who lived 3 houses down. "I came to express my disapproval of what they did to your tree," he said, his voice firm despite his age. "It is a complete outrage." I invited him in and, over a cup of coffee, I found out that Antonio was a retired lawyer who specialized in real estate law. "These actions by the association have been questionable lately," he said carefully. "My wife and I have noticed some worrisome patterns." I showed him all the documentation I had gathered about the storage unit. He examined everything with careful eyes, occasionally taking notes in a small notebook. "This is clearly manipulation," he concluded. "The document you signed was altered later on. Look at how the formatting changes in this section." The following Sunday, Antonio and his wife, Mrs. Martins, invited me to lunch. There I met Gabriel, my real estate agent neighbor, and 3 other residents who were dissatisfied with Regina's management. Condominium fees increased 40% in 2 years with no visible improvements, explained Sophia, an accountant who had lived in the complex for more than a decade. "And the maintenance contracts always go to the same companies," added Carlos, a civil engineer. "Always at prices way above the market rate." We formed an informal investigation group that day. Each of us took on specific responsibilities. Antonio would handle the legal part, Sophia would analyze the association's finances, Gabriel would research property histories, and I would gather evidence on the storage unit. The following week, our findings were alarming. I found records of systematic embezzlements, Sophia revealed while spreading spreadsheets across the Martins' living room table. Regina approved special projects without proper details. In the last 18 months, about $230,000 just disappeared. Gabriel brought even more compromising information. Eduardo Oliveira, Regina's husband, works in the city's planning department, he explained. "I discovered that 3 companies which frequently receive contracts from our association are registered under names of his relatives." Mrs. Martins, who had been very active in the association meetings, added, "Regina manipulates the meeting minutes. Several important decisions were never voted on by members, they were just recorded as if they had been." Sitting there in that room, I realized that my storage unit was just the tip of the iceberg. Regina and Eduardo had turned the condominium into their little realm of corruption, using intimidation and manipulation to silence anyone who opposed them. "We need to act strategically," warned Antonio. "They will not hesitate to retaliate again if they sense our moves." It was Camila Ferreira, the association secretary, who brought us the final piece of the puzzle. She approached me discreetly after a failed attempt to question Regina about document discrepancies. "I found this hidden in the file room," she said as she handed me a folder. These are communications between Regina and construction companies. They inflate the budgets, and she approves them. Later, the difference is divided. Camila looked terrified. She threatened me when I asked questions. She mentioned that my daughter might lose her spot at the condominium's daycare. That night, we gathered our expanded group for a strategy session. Teresa prepared dinner while we discussed our options. We could present everything directly to the police, suggested Carlos. Not yet, Antonio cautioned. We need irrefutable evidence. They are smart and have connections at the city hall. Then Teresa proposed the idea that would change everything. What if Lucas pretended to give in completely, she suggested. Formally offer the storage unit, make them feel secure enough to let down their guard? Good morning, Regina, I greeted her at the association's office, forcing a friendly smile. I have a proposal for peace. She looked at me with suspicion. I am listening. I've been thinking about the whole situation, and I realized I've been selfish. The storage unit would really be more useful to the community than to me. Regina could not hide her surprise. I am willing to make an official donation, with all the proper documentation, I continued. No more legal disputes. I just want to be recognized as the donor and have occasional access to store a few personal items. Her expression shifted into a calculating smile. That is an interesting change of perspective. The tree made me realize that some battles are not worth fighting, I lied, looking down. And Teresa is pregnant. I do not want any more stress for her. That last false piece of information was the final blow. Regina loved being the first to hear any personal news she could spread around the condominium. Congratulations on the baby, she exclaimed with feigned cordiality. I will prepare the paperwork immediately. We shall have a special event to recognize your generosity. 3 days later, I signed the new agreement in the presence of Regina, Eduardo, and 2 board members. Gabriel, as a licensed real estate agent, acted as my witness, a choice Regina accepted, unaware of our alliance. Antonio had carefully prepared the document, including specific clauses that guaranteed me unrestricted monthly maintenance access and the right to install security equipment for the protection of community assets. The next morning, I used those clauses to discreetly install 6 high-definition security cameras at strategic points in the storage unit. Sophia, using her technical skills, set up a system that streamed the footage directly to a secure server. Everything is ready, she confirmed after testing the system. Now we wait for them to take the bait. We did not have to wait long. Exactly 1 week after the signing, the cameras captured Regina and Eduardo entering the storage unit after business hours, carrying 3 boxes of documents. This place is perfect, Eduardo commented, unaware that he was being recorded. No one will ever look here, and technically it is now condominium property. Lucas is an idiot, Regina laughed as she opened one of the units. He has no idea that he got rid of a big problem for us. For 2 hours, we watched as they methodically organized documents, transferring some into a portable shredder and sorting others into color-coded folders. They are destroying evidence, Antonio observed, while we watched the footage live from my living room. And organizing their scheme, added Sophia. Look at how methodical they are. This isn't panic, this is a system. Over the next few weeks, our cameras recorded several visits. Eduardo would bring accountants and businessmen for discreet meetings at the storage unit. Regina often showed up with new documents, always after 9 at night. On one of those occasions, we captured a particularly damning conversation between them and a City Hall employee about adjustments to scheduled inspections and campaign contributions in exchange for fast approvals. All the while, I maintained my act. I participated in condominium events, publicly thanked Regina when she installed a plate naming the place Lucas's community storage donation, and even endured a speech praising my exemplary community spirit during a condominium barbecue. It's working perfectly, Teresa said one night as we reviewed new evidence. They really believe you gave in. The annual meeting of Bella Vista Condominium always had low attendance, another factor that made Regina's control easier. But in the weeks leading up to the meeting, our group discreetly mobilized the residents, emphasizing the importance of showing up for important announcements about community improvements. On the day of the event, the party hall was packed. Regina looked pleased with the large audience, assuming everyone was there to applaud her leadership. She began the meeting in her usual self-congratulatory tone. "This has been a year of great achievements for our community," she declared while presenting slides with carefully edited numbers. "Thanks to our efficient management, we managed to implement all the planned projects without any significant fee increases." When the slide about the community storage center came up, Regina called me up on stage. "I would like to publicly acknowledge Mr. Lucas's generosity for donating his property for the benefit of all of us. That was the moment we had planned." I walked up the stage, thanked her for the recognition, and asked if I could show a short video I had prepared in celebration of the community. Regina agreed without suspecting a thing. The lights went out and the first clip started. Regina and Eduardo were arguing openly about how they had manipulated my signature on the original document. "You are seeing the exact moment I was deceived," I calmly explained as the video continued. But that was only the beginning. The following clips showed secret meetings at the storage unit, discussions about fund misappropriation, document shredding of compromising evidence, and bribe negotiations. Each segment was accompanied by precise dates and times. Regina tried to interrupt the presentation, but two security guards hired by Antonio made sure the video kept playing. Eduardo tried to leave the hall, only to be met by two plainclothes investigators waiting discreetly at the entrance. In the last 3 months, I continued as the final clip ended. A group of concerned residents systematically investigated what goes on behind the scenes in our association. Then Sophia took over, distributing detailed financial reports that showed discrepancies of more than $450,000 over 3 years. Antonio presented legal documentation proving bylaw and municipal statute violations. The hall erupted with questions and shocked exclamations. Regina, pale, tried one last move. "This is a setup. A personal vendetta over that stupid tree." "The tree that was illegally cut," interjected Mrs. Martins as she stood up. "Without municipal environmental board approval, which resulted in a $15,000 fine for the condominium, money we all paid without knowing." One by one, other residents began sharing their own experiences: arbitrary fines, approvals denied without justification, services charged but never carried out. Camila Ferreira, visibly trembling, handed over a folder with the original documents she had rescued from the shredder. These prove the falsification of meeting minutes and approvals that never took place. The police, who had been previously informed about all the evidence, began reading Regina and Eduardo their rights. I will never forget the shock on their faces when they realized that their own actions at the safe storage unit had been their biggest mistake. "This condominium now needs new leadership," I concluded as the couple was escorted out. Leadership based on transparency, honesty, and true community spirit. Not people who turn our homes into their personal kingdom of intimidation. Looking at the faces in front of me, some shocked, others relieved, many determined, I realized that we had not only recovered a storage unit, but had also started the healing of an entire community. The following weeks after the public exposure were intense. Regina and Eduardo's pre-trial detention generated headlines in the local newspaper: "Couple embezzles over $450,000 from luxury condominium." While the official investigations advanced, our community needed to heal and rebuild its administrative structure. At an emergency meeting 2 days after the couple's arrest, Mrs. Martins was elected interim president of the association. Her first act was to set up a transition and transparency committee. "We need to examine everything," she declared in her first official statement. From service contracts to the association bylaws. What happened wasn't just the failure of 2 people, it was a system that allowed abuses to occur. The full extent of the scheme was devastating. The financial records, now audited by an independent auditor, revealed over 30 overpriced contracts. We learned that certain services, such as maintaining the community pool, were being charged at double the market rate, with the difference flowing directly into phantom accounts. They created a complex network of small frauds, explained Sophia during an informational meeting. Each individual misappropriation didn't raise alarms, but the overall sum is staggering. Several of the contracted companies did not even legally exist, they were just names on papers, with payments directed to the personal accounts of family members of the Oliveira couple. The audit also revealed that the condominium's reserve fund, which should have contained more than $300,000 for emergencies and major repairs, was nearly empty. "Now we understand why our playground has been broken for 2 years," commented one mother during the meeting. "And why the burnt-out light bulbs are never replaced." The psychological impact on the community was significant. Many residents expressed feelings of betrayal and naivety for having trusted Regina for so long. Others felt guilt for not having questioned the inconsistencies sooner. To help restore community trust, Mrs. Martins implemented strict transparency measures. All board meetings became open to residents. The association's contracts and bank statements were made available for review. An online system allowed everyone to track every dollar spent. Transparency is not just about showing numbers, she explained during a community coffee event designed to bring neighbors closer. It's about creating a culture where questioning is normal and expected. Gradually, small victories began to emerge. We renegotiated contracts with legitimate suppliers, saving nearly 40% on essential services. Volunteers organized to carry out minor repairs around the condominium, saving even more money. The most significant changes, however, happened in the relationships among the residents. People who had only exchanged polite greetings before now formed working groups, shared skills and resources, and built true community bonds. Gabriel led a project to review the association bylaws, including term limits and stricter requirements for approving expenses. Antonio offered free legal consultation to ensure that our new rules were sound. Camila Ferreira, who had overcome her fear to expose the corruption, became a respected voice on the new board, taking charge of monitoring the association's communication with residents. "Never again will documents be falsified or minutes manipulated," she promised during her nomination. "Every written word will be truthful and verifiable." On a sunny Sunday, we organized a gardening day to revitalize the neglected common areas. More than 50 residents showed up with tools, plant saplings, and enthusiasm to work. Children helped plant flowers, teenagers painted shabby benches, and adults repaired equipment. During that event, Mrs. Martins called me aside for a private conversation. "Lucas, I want to discuss the storage unit," she began. "Legally, it still belongs to you since the donation resulted from fraud. What do you plan to do now?" It was a question Teresa and I had discussed at length at home. "We have a proposal for the community," I replied. "We want to transform it into a true community center. Not based on lies, but on genuine cooperation." The following week, we presented our plan during a special assembly. We would convert half of the units for legitimate community use, storing association equipment, a shared tool area that residents could borrow from, and a space for seasonal donations destined for local families in need. The other half would be turned into small studios for artistic and educational activities, music classes, painting workshops, free tutoring sessions, and a co-working space for local entrepreneurs. "We don't just want to relinquish the space," I explained. "We want to be actively involved in its transformation. A formal, transparent agreement where the property remains ours, but the use benefits everyone." The proposal was met with enthusiastic applause. The project, which we named Centro Renassa, Renewal Center, would be managed by a mixed committee of residents, with decisions taken democratically and finances completely transparent. Renovations began the following month. Residents with specific skills offered their time and knowledge. Carlos, the engineer, supervised the structural modifications. Sophia developed an online scheduling system for the facility. Antonio handled the legal aspects of the new center. In just over 3 months, the old storage facility had transformed into a vibrant community hub. On Saturdays, children attended art workshops. Professionals offered free mentoring to young people interested in various fields. Elderly residents found a space to share traditional skills, from knitting to basic carpentry. During the official inauguration, as I watched the dozens of happy people moving about in the newly created spaces, Teresa shook my hand. "Your uncle would be proud," she whispered. "He left a storage unit, but you built a community." The journey had not been easy. The legal process against Regina and Eduardo continued, with new revelations emerging regularly. The condominium's financial recovery would take years. But something fundamental had changed. We had evolved from a group of houses into a true community of people who cared about one another. As I cut the ceremonial ribbon at the entrance of Centro Renassa, I reflected on how an unexpected inheritance, a lost tree, and an attempted theft had ironically given us so much more than I ever imagined. We not only recovered what was rightfully ours, but we discovered the true value of belonging and building together. Centro Renassa quickly became the beating heart of Bella Vista condominium. 6 months after the inauguration, over 80% of the residents had taken part in at least one activity there. The children affectionately called it the club, while the adults treated it like an extension of their own homes. The transformation of the storage facility mirrored the transformation of the community itself. The new association bylaws, now finalized and approved, implemented strict control and democratic participation measures. The monthly meetings, once nearly empty, now attracted dozens of engaged participants. We realized that we needed to protect not just our real estate investments, but the very idea of community itself, commented Antonio during the ceremony approving the new bylaws. The legal case against Regina and Eduardo progressed slowly, as is typical in the judicial system. Both were granted parole while awaiting trial, but they were forced to sell their house in the condominium and keep their distance from their former neighbors. In a surprising twist, the investigation revealed that the scheme had connections to other condominiums in the region. Apparently, Regina had perfected her method in previous communities before applying it on a larger scale at Bella Vista. One Saturday morning, while we were putting together a gardening day to plant more flowers in the communal gardens, I noticed something unusual at my front door, a wooden box containing a young oak sapling and an envelope. To replace what should never have been taken, the anonymous note said. Enclosed was a check for $15,000, roughly the estimated value of the century-old tree. I showed Teresa, who examined the handwriting carefully. "That looks like Eduardo's writing," she observed in surprise. "Could it be a genuine gesture of remorse?" We never confirmed the origin, but I decided to use the money to launch a tree planting project for the condominium. With help from a volunteer landscaper, we identified ideal spots for native trees that would provide shade and beauty for decades to come. "A tree is not just for us," I explained during the project's launch. "It is a commitment to the future, a promise to those who come after us." On the first anniversary of the exposure of the scheme, we organized a special event at Centro Renassa. Not to celebrate Regina and Eduardo's downfall, but to celebrate the community's rebirth. Dozens of residents shared stories of how their lives had changed over the past year. "My son found purpose in the robotics classes we offer here," commented an emotional mother. "Before, he was isolated in his room. Now, he leads a group of kids in amazing projects. I lost my husband 2 years ago," shared an elderly lady. "The knitting group and Tuesday chat saved my sanity. I found friends when I needed them most." The stories went on, each reinforcing the same theme: we had transformed a misfortune into an opportunity, turning a personal loss into a collective gain. The Centro Renassa model became a reference in the region. Representatives from other condominiums visited us regularly, seeking inspiration for their own communities. Camila, now completely empowered in her role as communicator, created a detailed manual outlining our experiences and lessons learned. "Transparency is contagious," she used to say, "just like corruption. The difference is that the former builds, while the latter destroys." 1.5 years after the inauguration, we expanded the scope of the center to include programs for the outside community. Free tutoring classes for public school children, professional workshops for underprivileged youth, and a food bank for families in need were all launched. "The walls of the condominium only define properties, not our humanity," I declared while presenting the expansion plan to the residents. On a quiet afternoon, as I watched children from both inside and outside the condominium playing together in the multi-use space, Teresa came over with our newborn son in her arms, our real son, not the one I had once fabricated to deceive Regina. "He will grow up in a real community," she commented, gazing at little Miguel. one where people know each other, care about one another, and build together. Sitting there, watching the constant flow of people at Centro Renassa, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that brought us here. A simple yellow envelope with a storage unit key had set off a chain of events that transformed not only physical structures but the very social fabric of an entire community. The new trees we planted around the condominium were still small, but they grew strong and promising. Like our community, they would need constant care, proper nourishment, and occasional protection. But in time, they would offer shade, beauty, and sustenance to generations we had yet to meet. The anonymous oak tree we received showed promising signs in the center of our garden. It would never replace the lost century-old tree, but it carried a powerful symbolism, the human capacity to recognize mistakes, seek redemption, and contribute to a new beginning. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to access more stories like this.